Hi, I'm Josiah,
And I'm Colin.
and this is Worth Watching. So, we just watched Insidious, and,
Yeah.
Alright, so this weekend the main movie that came out was Riddick, and neither Colin or I have seen either of the other two films of the trilogy, so rather than do that, we figured we would bring you a review of Insidious before Insidious 2 comes out, and we review that next week. So the movie we're going to be reviewing tonight is Insidious. It stars Patrick Wilson and Rose Byrne. It deals with this couple. They've just moved into this new house, and while one of their sons is exploring the attic, he falls and hits his head. At first, everything seems like it's okay, but then the next day he goes into a coma, doesn't wake up. The doctors don't know what's wrong. Everything's physically fine with him, but he's not there. It turns out he is actually being haunted. He is possessed by this creature from this other dimension called the Further, and it's preventing him from waking up. It's trying to get into his body and possess him. And so all sorts of creepy stuff are happening around the house. They think the house is haunted. It keeps getting creepier and creepier throughout, and thus we have our movie. What did you think of it?
I really liked it. It didn't feel like your usual horror movie. It didn't have the usual cliches in it that you're always able to predict. Oh, okay, that's in, 5 other horror movies that I've seen. They actually turned the light on when they walked into the bedroom in the dark. They didn't,
They actually moved houses when stuff started being haunted.
Yes.
Instead of staying in the same house.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and I know the writer of the film, Lee Whannell, when he was writing it, he had a bunch of post-it notes with different horror movie cliches posted on the wall when he was writing to make sure that he didn't use any of them, to make sure that it remained original and wasn't just like, oh, this is so predictable.
Which is one of the reasons why it's a good movie, because it didn't have that usual...
Yeah, I think that was really good. And I also thought the acting in the movie was really good as well.
Yeah.
I thought Patrick Wilson did a really good job.
He was great.
Yeah, Patrick Wilson, I always like seeing him. I think he's a fantastic actor. Both the kids, I thought, did a really good job.
Yeah.
Rose Byrne,
she was okay.
yeah, at times she was really good, and other times she just felt kind of forced, and she felt kind of like she was
almost
horror
like
movie acting.
Yeah.
Yeah, but other than that, I think the acting overall was pretty good as well. One of the things I wasn't particularly fond of was the fact that I always enjoy it when a horror movie kind of very slowly ratchets up the tension. You don't really see a lot of the, something's scariest when you can't see it. Okay. In this one, I felt like we saw too much of the demons and things like that too early on in the movie. Like you kind of got a full-on look at them.
See,
right.
I didn't mind that.
Really?
No, I actually kind of liked how they introduced everything.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, the one big thing I particularly didn't like was the pacing. It didn't do a good job, I felt, explaining any of the events that were happening. You almost kind of left in the clouds, like, okay, what's really happening? It really didn't explain what happened until the end. Like, I feel like they could have shortened the pacing by half hour.
See, I really like that slow pacing, though. I like the way that, especially in a horror movie, I like the way that kind of very slowly ratchets up the tension, just slowly just twists and turns and brings it, tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. And then finally stuff starts happening at about the halfway point of the movie. Like, I don't like seeing anything until the halfway point of the movie. I like it to just slowly build up and build up and build up and build up. Because by the time stuff happens, you're all just prepped for it and you're afraid of everything at that point.
I think he's possessed.
One thing that I was not particularly... The one problem that I kind of found at the movie was that in this realm of the Further that the child is in, whenever any scene takes place in that realm, it really, to me, felt sort of like it was like a TV movie, like something that was shot on... It felt like it was shot on video and not film. I don't know if it was shot on a different medium, but just felt
I
cheap.
will agree with that one. That did. It really... Yeah, I'll agree on that one.
Which was disappointing, because it's supposed to be kind of the scariest point of the whole movie. And, the stuff that was happening was really creepy, but I couldn't quite get into it, because it felt like this feels like...
The quality was almost kind of cheesy.
Yeah, it felt cheesy just because of... It just looked cheap. And
even the CGI a couple of times, especially when you saw the main demon in the movie, where, there were a couple times you saw him and you kind of like, that.
Which, again, I will say, I'm glad that you saw the main demon as little as you did.
Yes.
Because the CGI on him wasn't that great, and that allowed these quick little shots of him to be so effective, because your mind didn't have time to analyze it.
Yeah.
But, I mean, overall, I really did like the movie. I think it's one of the best horror movies I've ever seen. It's really well done. I thought it was well-paced, well-acted. It was shot very well. The cinematography was extremely effective.
Yep.
It had a great, very unnerving soundtrack. Really, really old-school horror sounding with all, the breaking strings and stuff that really worked in there. What would you give the movie on F through A to F?
I'd give it an A.
Yeah.
It deserves an A. Even though there were a couple minor things here and there.
Yeah, there was
just
just
something about it.
nitpicking things at the time. I mean, there
There's
was
something about it that
it was an
deserves an A.
extremely good movie. Yeah, I would definitely give it an A. You know, I had a couple of issues with a couple little points in it, stuff that's really that I can definitely forgive based on how good the rest of the movie was. Like it just was so well done. I would happily watch it again. Very creepy, very just really frightening.
Yeah.
Really good movie.
I'm really looking forward to seeing the sequel.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be your usual, Insidious 1, Insidious 2. No, this is actually part 2, because the way the movie ended, it ended in such a way that it leads right into part 2, and it's going to further explain number 1.
Right, which is one of the problems you have with number 1. So I guess if number 2 is part 2, you'll probably really like part 2 because
exactly.
they'll probably have more explaining going on.
Yeah, so I'm actually excited if finally, hopefully, will be a good sequel, because usually sequels to horror movies are just awful.
Yeah, so fingers crossed. We'll see you next week and we'll find out if he's right.
All right, bye.